Hi there, everybody. Steve the Amateur Historian. It's June 4th, 2021. Granted, the article that I'm going to discuss says it was dated June 2nd, but it was posted in a June 4th issue of the Oregon Daily Journal, which is one of probably my most favorite old newspaper to get stories for this series. They always seem to get their hands on the real strange ones. And that guy just called me a homo. Real classy. Jesus. That was a full-grown guy too. That guy looked like he was like 40. It must be my beautiful long hair. Good God. You suck, sir. That was tragic. That was really, really sad. Anyway, I guess it's my responsibility to liven things up. I've got a relatively short article that I'm going to cover in this episode, but there's lots of just little intriguing elements to it, and I just thought this is too entertaining of a story to pass up. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm still distracted by that douchebag. Anyway, if you're new to the channel or you just haven't done it yet, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon. If you want to help me out there, I'm always posting podcasts, little podcast things I've done, previously unreleased content, lots of little things to bring to you as extras, but you can only access them if you become a patron. And honestly, if you give me $1, I'll love you till the day you die if you give me $1 a month. My hope is to grow that, and that allows me to do more, stuff that I do. The link to my Patreon is in the description with this video, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content I'm producing here on my channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. And if you're wondering why I say all this stuff super quick, it's because I've said it like 100 different times, so I have it pretty much memorized. I'm also trying to get through it real quickly, so those of you that are used to watching my channel and know that I'm going to do this stuff every time, you don't have to wait too long for me to go through it, even though I'm realizing now, as I'm continuing to talk really fast, I'm just delaying the start of the video even more. But, whatever. Anyway, all that said, let's get to today's video. All right, we're going back to Chicago, Illinois for this one. I just noticed periodically Chicago will pop up in, I guess, it's one of the biggest cities in America, so I guess it makes sense the stories would pop up more frequently there than possibly other places. So, we have a classic case of adultery. Let's talk about adultery a little bit. There's probably hundreds of people at this moment as I'm vlogging that are talking about or committing adultery. Probably not talking about it. There's probably a lot more people talking about it. But there's a bunch of people right now committing acts of adultery. And of course, adultery way back in the day, going back, some 100 years ago, that was a big deal. Again, some husbands would kill their wives' lovers and get away with it because it was thought that infidelity and adultery was sometimes worse than murder. And if you were the kind of scum that would invade a family home and try to steal away the wife, which was a wife in most cases, steal away the wife from her husband and her loving children, you were a piece of trash that deserved to be shot dead where you stand. Well, here we are in Chicago, and a Mrs. Antonia Knight, and I actually looked up how to pronounce that name. I thought it was probably Knight, but I legitimately looked up how to pronounce it. Like, if you think I'm kidding, like, no, look at this. See, I literally looked up how to pronounce it, and the American pronunciation of the name is Knight, which makes sense because it's pretty much the word night with just an extra T. So, Antonia Knight is, her husband is gone, and she has another man over, a man named Savina Yodish, which is a fantastic name, if I do say so myself. Savina Yodish comes over, and Antonia and him are more than likely going to engage in an affair, and why shouldn't they? Antonia's husband is gone. And this is actually one of the things I really love about this article, because as I've said numerous times in videos I've done, a lot of times women, unless they're single, they haven't taken the name of their husband or whatever, lots of times women, especially wives, their names were not printed in newspapers. They were just printed as Mrs., her husband's name, because wives didn't deserve their own identity, apparently. And this is a flip on that, because we're given her name, Antonia Knight. We're given the wife's name, but we're never given her husband's name. He's just referred to as her husband. So her nameless husband, I guess Mr. Knight, sounds like somebody who would be doing a middle of the night like radio show. It's me, Mr. Knight, playing the oldies from the 50s and 60s and maybe a little bit of the 70s as well. I don't know, I guess I was trying to do like a Wolfman Jack thing. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, Mrs. Knight and Mr. Yodish have the night to themselves. They take it to the bedroom, and it seems like some action is going to ensue of the sexual variety. They get into the bedroom. Antonia Knight is being coy. She sits down on the bed, and Mr. Yodish is standing there just staring down at her in all of her glory. And it's a perfect moment, even with the adulterous nature. It's just the two of them ready to share in a magic encounter. And then out of nowhere, there's a gunshot, and Savina Yodish gets shot. Little did Antonia Knight realize, but her husband did not, in fact, leave. Her husband was hiding under the bed, because he obviously at that point had become suspicious of his wife. He probably figured she was doing something sneaky on the side, and you know how jealous husbands get, especially back in the day. They will go to extreme lengths to get vindication. And again, you know, men who tried to have affairs with other people's wives, they were, you know, the open season. It was open hunting season on these guys. People knew. Now granted, this was kind of, you know, late teens into the 20s. This was kind of when that whole philosophy was kind of fading. That was more a late 1800s, start of the 1900s thing in Portland. But there were husbands who in cold blood gunned down the men that they caught their wives sleeping with, and they got away with it. I've done a video about a guy named Charles Reynolds who went home from work with his gun, walked into his house, caught his wife and this guy named George Hibbins in the act, pulled his gun out and fired like 4 rounds into the guy. Hibbins stumbled out of the house all bloody and managed to stumble a few blocks to his room at the Lincoln Hotel, and then he just collapsed and died. Charles Reynolds got off. He was acquitted in less than a half hour, and when he was acquitted, the courtroom gave him a standing ovation. Then there's a guy, George Chamberlain, who, kind of like Mr. Knight, he didn't hide under his bed, but he made his wife think he was leaving, and he went outside and hid under his porch and waited for a guy named Andrew Masson to show up, who he knew his wife was fooling around with. When Masson finally showed up and went into his house, Chamberlain followed behind, stormed into his bedroom, fired some rounds into Masson. Masson stumbled out of the house into an alleyway and collapsed dead in an area that would be right behind the Mission Theater, the McMinimans Mission Theater in Northwest Portland. And not only did Chamberlain get off, the grand jury that was convened decided to not take it to trial. So he didn't even have to go on trial to be acquitted, even though he gunned down a man in premeditated cold blood. So husbands kind of knew to an extent that they could get away with this kind of stuff. And I think Mr. Knight thought, you know, I'm defending my home against this scum who wants to slime his way in to my family and engage in an adulterous affair with my wife. I think Mr. Knight fully thought he could get away with it. And also, you know, prideful creatures men are. And if you take something from them, like their wife, even if they don't treat their wife very well, you're still taking away their wife. And many a man has gone absolutely berserk, itchy trigger finger nuts, and have gone after people in just a blaze of seeing nothing but red glory, going after these people. So I think Mr. Knight thought he could get away with it, but I also think Mr. Knight was maybe in a state where he was seeing all red. So the moment is sufficiently killed. The romance is out of the room. Yodish looks down and sees the husband of the woman he's engaging in an affair with beginning to slide out from under the bed, and he obviously has a firearm on his person. So, you know, he looks at Antonia and says, "Sorry, babe, I love you, but I gotta bounce." And he stumbles out of the bedroom and, you know, to the front door to stumble out of the house to get away. He does not want to die tonight, especially knowing that he's committed adultery and people are probably going to be pissed at him no matter what happens to him. So Mr. Knight then slides out the rest of the way from under the bed, looks up at his wife sitting on the bed, says, "I'll be back to talk to you later," and flies out of the house like a bat out of hell, scanning the streets looking for Yodish. He gets at least one more shot off, hits Yodish in the arm. So Yodish is panicking, his heart rate's probably up quite a bit, and he's starting to bleed, and he just stumbles into a saloon, you know. Smart thing to do, stumble into a place where there's lots of other people. And it appears that's how he was able to escape Mr. Knight's murderous fury, because he probably didn't follow him into the saloon, you know, still just bullets flying, which is probably a good idea, because you think about back in this day, and back in a town with such a rich criminal history as Chicago, even way back then, and it's a busy saloon, like, I'm willing to bet, a crowded saloon on a night, on any random night, there was probably half the people in that saloon probably also had guns on him. And if Mr. Knight came stumbling in just firing chaotically, a bunch of these guys probably would have pulled their guns and started firing, not even knowing what's going on. Just bullets are flying, all right, me too. And next thing you know, you've got who knows how many guns just firing off, scatterbrained in an assortment of different directions. Nobody really knows what's going on, but everybody's being reactive. I mean, we could have had Mr. Knight chosen to pursue following Yodish all the way into that saloon with his gun still going. Like, we could have had a good old-fashioned Chicago bloodbath on our hands. And for once, it wouldn't have been something related to organized crime. It would have just been a bunch of, yep. Huh? I'm called Steve the Amateur Historian. Let's talk about a lot of old local stuff. Yeah. These are the days. Someone sees you walking with a camera and on a selfie stick, and immediately they're like, "You're a YouTuber." Anyway, so as I was saying, there could have been a bloodbath, but fortunately there wasn't. And I don't think Yodish died from the injuries he sustained. They at least said he didn't. They said that, you know, after the patrons of the saloon saw him there bleeding, they quickly gathered him up and rushed him to the nearest hospital, but there was no statement that he had died from his wounds. I think there was kind of scattershot, so he really didn't get hit, and like any, you know, didn't get hit in the chest, didn't get hit in the head or anything like that. So he escaped with his life, but his reputation had to be shot by then. He was still an adulterer in old school America. And of course, Mr. Knight, the man himself, is quickly converged upon and arrested for his actions. And it's just late enough in time that, and of course it wasn't Portland. The cases I talked about husbands getting away with murdering their wives' lovers were all Portland based, and obviously whatever given city you're in, they're gonna have a different attitude about this delicate sort of thing. And we were just kind of starting to get to that point where honor killing, justifiable homicide, you know, terms that were thrown around that kind of justified what was happening in these instances. It was kind of becoming less and less of a thing, and people were more and more over time starting to actually have to pay for their actions, especially when you shoot at somebody, regardless of what the motivation was. And he didn't kill, again, as far as I can tell, he didn't kill Yodish, so the fact that it was still kind of during that time and he didn't actually kill the guy, even though it was obviously premeditated, he was laying under bed in wait just itching to take a shot at this guy, I would think he probably got into a minimal amount of trouble, if any. But the nice little cherry on the top, as the article concludes and as the story concludes. So, Miss Antonia Knight has already shown that she's an adulteress, a filthy whore. So her you know, reputation's not going to take as big of a hit, because back in that time, you know, the sexist attitudes towards women, the attitude was kind of like, oh, she couldn't control herself, she was manipulated by this devilish, adulterizing man. Did I say adulterizing? So lots of times, if you know that was happening, the wives weren't really held accountable because stupidity. However, when this whole situation went down, Yodish was taken to the hospital. Mr. Knight was arrested and taken to the police station. Antonia Knight's maybe still sitting on her bed like, what the F just happened? When she's brought down and spoken to, she lays down some more deets. She's not only I don't even know if this qualifies as illegal, because it's different countries, but Miss Antonia Knight reveals she is not only one who is okay with committing adultery, she's also an international bigamist. She admits to authorities that she has, she's married supposedly to Mr. Knight, her husband in Chicago, who she's cheating on. She also claims that she has a husband and some children back in Italy. So why she's in Chicago, I don't know. Did she just have some kids and decided to bail on the family? I don't know. But that was the last little piece of information she liked to lay down. She not only was an adulteress, she was also a bigamist. Scum of the earth. We're talking real horrid level 10 crimes here. Just a very dysfunctional situation is what I take away from all this. I wonder if her husband even knew that she was married before. Maybe maybe after he gets out of jail, he'll get a ticket, fly to Italy, and kill her first husband. Or maybe no, wait. Technically, he maybe unknowingly is committing adultery because he slept with and married a married woman. If he knew, he's a bigamist. The guy, her husband from Italy, should be coming to Chicago to shoot Mr. Knight for some of the same reasons that Mr. Knight decided to shoot at Mr. Yodish. This whole story's out of control. I don't know what to do with this information anymore. So I should probably cut myself off before I start really getting crazy about this stuff. Just people. People are crazy, man. Anyway, that's the chaotic story of the Knights and an act of adultery that was rapidly, literally, pardon the pun, but literally shot down by a husband who they didn't know he was hiding under the bed. So thank you so much for joining me today, for watching, for supporting this series, for supporting my channel, for supporting me in this endeavor. Because I've done a lot of stuff for this channel, and if you're new to the channel or you haven't done it yet, remember to like. Give the video a like. It always helps. Share, subscribe. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe. It helps my channel grow. Of course, there's that Patreon just sitting out there waiting to entice you. Even if it's $1, you have no idea how helpful that is and how much I would appreciate that. And if you become a patron, even for a simple $1, you get access to little podcast things I do, previously unreleased content, old videos that I haven't re-uploaded, a bunch of stuff you cannot see that I've done unless you become a patron today. The link to that is in the description with this video, as well as links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content I'm producing here on my channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. And all that said, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I'll see you tomorrow.